Hi, we meet again. What if I tell you that starting out in Gran Turismo 4 with a million credits is not as easy as you think? Today, that's exactly what I will show you. How is this challenge can be possibly and difficult, you might ask? Well then, dear viewer, stay tuned to find out. For my first car, I bought a Fiat 500R and took on the lightweight K car cup. From it, I won an AutoZam, and since it was a middle-engine car, I used it to enter DMR challenge. To better my odds, I had practically maxed the compact out, minus the exhaust system and the turbo upgrades. This had increased my car's horsepower to a whopping 74 horsepower. Damn. By the way, these upgrades had set me back at least 30 grand, practically unheard of in this stage of progression. I stuck to the Opel all the way to the third corner, where I could final attack and gain P5. Once the Opel was dealt with, I practically dove onto the roundabout to take on the Spree as soon as I could. That was P4, and I had done almost half of the first lap. So far, things have been looking up. Immediately, I closed in on the NSX's room to maneuver, made the overtake right before the Honda could free himself away from the Elise. I caught up to the MR2 and made quick work of the mid-engine Toyota after turn 15. Honestly, for a race which will yield a whopping 196 A-spec points upon victory, this was easier than I thought. Of course, I kept my finger on the nitrous trigger button just to stay afloat. With more than half of a bottle remaining, I was free to go wild with the nitrous. As a result, by the second checkpoint, I was ahead by almost 5 seconds. The prospect of a 70-something horsepower AutoZam could cap the likes of Honda NSX was insane. Yet, it happened anyway. The first race was won by a surprising landslide, an absolute victory for the AutoZam. The next race was set in New York. On the roundabout, I managed to somewhat regulate the AutoZam to take the inner lane of the corner. This had allowed me to duel the Elise and open my aggression towards the rest of the grid. Afterwards, I tailed the black Elise and helped the car pull itself through via slipstream. Thanks to the ever-present nitrous boost and reduced wind resistance, I managed to keep up. Once we entered the 90-degree corner jungle, I beat the Elise in the impromptu chicken race and made my way to P5. On this section, none of my opponents could utilize all of their engine's power. Meanwhile, with my tiny AutoZam, I could take braver lines, brake later, and still make my way through these corners smoothly. This blue compact seemed to be the perfect fit, and I used this to make as many overtakes as I could before we inevitably leave for the long straights. Just like that, I was already on the podium. But the podium was not why I was there. I was there to win that golden trophy. That's it. All or nothing. P2 was finally at hand right before the high-speed debauchery began. And just as I had predicted, the NSX quickly reversed all of that hard work in one quick moment. To add more problems to the pile, the AutoZam had topped out. I cannot even use the nitrous to get faster if I wanted to. There was a little respite in the hairpin, which apparently was enough to even briefly regain the silver medal. Unfortunately, right after that, another straight line debacle happened. Naturally, I was kicked back to the bronze medal, with a noticeable distance to boot. The roundabout did help in putting me back into the competition. However, my real chance would sit on the 90-degree corner jungle. So, I went to work. On the second corner of this technical section, the NSX was finally through. The Spree could not do much to prevent my victory on this section either, as the AutoZam was too agile to be held back in an environment full of corners. The real danger was after this section was done and dealt with. Now, dealing with one car? Easy. Dealing with two ambitious racers who were willing to do anything to win? Now that was quite a tall order, especially when your car is only as certain as powerful as those ravenous racers. On the hairpin, I aggressively claimed my position, and with only 2 bars of the nitrous left, I threw caution to the wind and completely intended to use all of them. Even boosted with the nitrous, the NSX was still faster than my AutoZam on the straight line. I had to defend myself with all I had from being beaten by the Honda at the last minute. Finally, the finish line. After 2 laps of being at the edge of my seat, I scored another win in the event. Well then, through the MR challenge, I had proved that with a lot of money, even the AutoZam could beat the likes of the NSX and the Spree. On Beginner's Hall, the happy hour part of the game. What about something harder that's also filled with sports cars, such as the Japan Championship? 200 whole A-spec points for winning one race. This is the game's trying to tell you that whatever you're trying to attempt ranges from excruciatingly hard to outright impossible. I, Strix Racer, the responsible racer millionaire that I am, decided to ignore such warnings and readied up to face off against Japan's finest. On the first turn, the Black Impreza was true along with the Evo 7. As I had expected, the GC8, which had started from pole position, was to be my greatest rival. I tried chasing him down to the Coca-Cola, and instead of gaining on him, I climbed up to the curb and disturbed the already disadvantaged Altazam. On the hairpin, I thought I could start gluing myself to the Impreza's back, only to be left for the dust as the 300R was too fast of a section for the tiny compact. So, with the Impreza having remarkable cornering and blistering speeds, what chance did I have? Well done, friend. Let me introduce you to the CRT, short for Creative Racing Technique. By skipping the chicane, I was far in front of the pack. However, that didn't mean easy victory. That meant I got a brief breathing room before my rivals inevitably came knocking back. Right on the 100R, the GC8 was right behind me. All that gap made from the Creative Racing Technique, it was already all spent. Right after the hairpin, the Impreza shoved me aside and reclaimed victory. I had thrown so much money to this car already. I refused to let some special Impreza take it all away. So, I did what I had to do to take P1 back. On the third lap, I anxiously waited for the shoe to drop, for the Impreza to make a comeback in where I was most vulnerable. But it never happened. I was so far out, not even long straights could redeem them anymore. Even after the hairpin, I was a second away from the GC8. Maybe it was time to stop taking creative lines and go around the track properly. So, for the first time in this run, I slowed down for the chicane, took the sharp right and followed the proper racing line without touching a blade of grass. That turned out to be a bad idea. See, while I was faster on the chicane than the rest, taking this high road while being this slow had opened a definitive window for the GC8 to take first place. To make things worse, the Lancer came in uninvited and rained on my parade too. As for the Mitsubishi, I still could fight him on the first corner. It was all far from over, however. On the chicane, I decided to use the Creative Racing Technique and gain a 4-second lead over the Impreza. I knew the GC8's resurgence on the final lap was inevitable. So, seeing as how light my car was, I avoided confrontation and just let him. I managed to deal with the Coca-Cola faster, preventing the GC8 from reaching distances not even my technique could salvage. After the hairpin, I was apparently still a second behind. On the 300R though, crisis began to form. I lost my cool and the car felt it. I was wobbling through, shaken behind the mighty Subaru, and even that didn't have an ideal ending either. I missed the asphalt on the other side and got a lucky break on returning to the asphalt. On the final straight, I used every last bit of nitrous left. I needed all the speed I could muster to fend the Impreza off. And then, there it was, the finish line! My last stand worked, resulting in the first win of the championship. The second round was set on Tsukuba circuit, 10 whole laps, and the layout does not allow for creative racing techniques to be deployed. Nowhere to cut, and that straight section was simply bad news for the tiny Altazam. If I wanted any chance to win this one, I have to at least try and qualify. Imagine my surprise when I noticed I was faster than P2 by an entire second by the first checkpoint. Sure, I practically had abused the nitrous at this point, but that was to keep up, not outright dominate. These results brought back hope. Maybe, just maybe, if I play good here, I can win. In the actual race, the rolling start helped a lot as I get to launch with full speed before everyone else. I remembered what I had learned by trying hard to Gold to P licenses had taught me. I stuck close to the curbs on each hairpin, even sacrificed speed to keep that lane. This, combined with a healthy ratio of nitrous per lap, had allowed me to keep my lead throughout lap 1. Going into the second lap, the Lancer had grown close. Too close. By the second checkpoint, I had to make defensive maneuvers so the Lancer won't overthrow my hard-fought position. But some things are just inevitable, such as the Lancer making that overtake from speed difference alone. So, on the final bend, I took on the inner lane and reversed the tables. The system to win this race had been formed. Now, lap by lap, I rigorously followed it, ignoring any temptation to hammer the car down and wide out after the hairpin's apex. Block when you still can, pace the entire grid to your speed, and use nitrous sparingly. Save some for the final lap. On the fourth lap, the Impreza had replaced the Lancer's spot and fought me for the win. While my optimal approach down the final hairpin had allowed some breathing room, my Altazam still could not keep up on the straights. So, instead of fighting a futile fight, I chose my battles. On the right-hander, I took the inner lane and stopped the Impreza's march before all was lost. I managed to return to P1 right on time and resume my duties to pace the race. On the 5th lap, the Impreza attacked again. Unfortunately for him, the hairpin was my domain. I knew exactly what to do to immediately reverse this, and with a well-timed nitrous boost, I could maintain my lead throughout the high-speed section this time. Right before the first corner, the Mitsubishi overtook me. And just like that Impreza, I overturned this by sticking to what I knew on these corners. I defended myself, took the best lanes, and ensured my opponents cannot do the same. I continued to set the pace for the race. It was on this lap I learned that I should let the other Zam slide throughout the final bend for a bit. On the 7th lap, the Lancer had lost all patience and switched to dirty tactics, thinking that I could just be swiped off the road like dust. So, I calmly let him pass, slow down just in time to take on the hairpin and launch my counterattack. With the Autozam's agility, I managed to score the quick comeback. That, however, was not the end of the fight. We continued to butt heads throughout the track. I blocked the Mitsubishi as much as I could. Meanwhile, the Lancer refused to surrender, kept on the fight, and throughout the latter half of the lap, we were engaged in a fierce showdown until the hairpin, where the Autozam's superior braking scored the advantage. Still, the battle raged on to lap 9, where the Lancer just outright shunted my car. Not only that, before the 4th corner, he tried to pull my moves on me, which he spectacularly failed at. Seriously? Using my own techniques against me? What makes you think that will work? Anyways, on this lap, I conserved the nitrous, so I would have at least 2 bars of nitrous ready to be liberally used on the final lap. On the final lap's 4th corner, I fended off the Impreza, and from that point on, refused to let anyone be in the way of the great takeoff. Once the final hairpin was dealt with, I hit the nitrous button, pedal to the metal, all or nothing. I have to be honest, this is the first time in ages I've been pushed this far. Only now I had to maintain my focus on the highest level for 11 entire minutes. All that while maintaining a calm demeanor to avoid rushed mistakes. One mistake, and that round would have been lost. Finally, the finish line. I have scored the win on the 2nd round. No tricks, no cutting, only technique, experience, and skill. Despite the staggering leading points, my fight was far from over. We were still in the 3rd round after all. In Tokyo, I didn't bother qualifying since it's a grid start. With only 6 racers, starting from 1st place meant little to nothing. I slid my way through the 7th corner, floating like a bird right behind the impressive Impreza. I tailgated the Subaru the best I could, took the inner lane and dueled the Impreza right before the long parabolic left-hander. I emerged victorious, P2 at hand. The only thing left to do was to take on the ever-dominant GCA. While I got quite close after that last corner, this entire section is a nightmare situation for my puny Autozam. With only barely above 100 horsepower, it was a no-brainer that the rest of my rivals would catch up and pay me back. I tried defending to the best of my abilities, refusing to go all the way back to 6th place. But this effort was met by the Z32's aggression. I was almost rotated, but managed to hang on. Unfortunately, at the aftermath of this deadly situation, all I could recover was P4. Again on the long straights, I had to defend myself and was almost sent spinning. Another deadly situation that didn't benefit me or the Z32. This time, I don't think I could take P4 no matter how hard I tried.
You're done, kid.
Damn! Alright, that's 3 in a row. I have no idea why is this Z32 in particular is so out for my blood specifically. I've done him no wrong. I barely interacted with him at all. Yet here he is, wanting to murder me in every single lap. With no room to cut, no place for creative racing techniques, and a straight section too long for the Autozam, as well as a murderous Z32 right behind. I was truly out of cards to play here. At the very least, I could defend against the... never mind. And that's the last lap too. No way to make a comeback, the track's too speed oriented for that. Never in this run had I ever been so thoroughly beaten. And I wasn't talking about getting P2 or P3 either. P6, dead last. I don't think I have ever gotten this position ever. And to make things worse, there was absolutely nothing I could do. No cutting, car was very light, which was made very clear by the Z32. And despite my conservative views, I still ran out of nitrous in the end. Well, that was that. A devastating defeat. I'm glad I won the first 2 rounds because the points from those rounds ended came in clutch. I was still leading, but only by 3 points. My biggest rival it was still the GC8. That means I could spare no quarter on the next 2 rounds. In Twin Ring Motegi, I qualified and got pole position. Since it featured a rolling start, this is quite bountiful as I get to launch off the parade first. To make things better, the GC8 got 5th place, while the RX8, which was second to last points-wise, got P2. This situation had given me an idea. Look, I learned that on high-speed situations, my Uncle Sam won't be defending anything. So, seeing how the RX-8 was far from winning this tournament anyway, how about I let that one go? It's not like the RX-8 will reach P1 by winning this round. I blocked the Lancer on the corner, denying all of his attempts from breaking free. With the Lancer's repeated failure and my defensive strategies waving around the track, there was little room on the road for the others to advance. While the Lancer seemed to have escaped containment, a sharp right was upon us. With superior braking and cornering, the defiant Mitsubishi was returned into the fold. Lap 2 and the Mazda had gapped me for almost 4 seconds. Good. I kept driving this car as fast as I could, took on the corners better than the rest of my rivals due to my car's agility. Right after the second checkpoint, my cornering work had even earned me a bit of a gap against the rest. That and the system I have discovered to remain ahead of the pack. Right after the hairpin, I employed the nitrous just enough to keep the other racers at bay. By lap 3, I boosted the car just enough right after the first couple of corners. This helped in maintaining the lead I had against the rest of the grid. With this method, I could conserve nitrous while remaining fast enough to stay in P2, or so I thought. Before the hairpin, there were only 2 bars of nitrous remaining, so I had to form a new plan on the fly, as sticking to the current system will exhaust me of nitrous before I hit the final straight. It was on this lap where I have to save nitrous for the last straights, meaning my opponents will be faster this time and they could catch up. Right before the hairpin, the black Impreza made his move. However, the sharp corner before us prevented him from doing anything drastic, allowing me to catch up and put him back where he belonged. The problem was that high-speed section waiting for us. One upstart Impreza? Easy. Problem arose when the Lancer joined the fray and essentially double-teamed me, who was driving a tiny, lightweight compact. Ultimately, the Impreza managed to escape. For now. In case you had forgotten, that was quite the sharp corner at the end of this section. With superior braking and a better line, I put both Imprezas back in the proverbial cage. And on the last straight, I spent what was left on the nitrous bottle and reached the finish line in 2nd place. I managed all my goals in this race. Let the RX-8 win, prevent the rest of the grid from overwhelming him, and finish in 2nd place. This way, I regained the lead while the RX-8 was still not my biggest, most dangerous opponent. On the final round, qualifying will not be substantial since it featured a grid start. So, with these in mind, I took on the Suzuka circuit. While I was about to be left behind on launch, I made my comeback on the S-curves, where, especially on the 6th corner, my opponents will excessively slow down, giving me perhaps the only window to gain and make an overtake. Speaking of opponents, that 22B had been a thorn on my side for far too long. So, how about I cement my win on this tournament right here and now? Ah! That little party trick had almost sent me to the Shadow Realm along with my victim, but luckily for me, I was able to recover. Just like that, P1 was at hand and the 22B hopefully got kicked to the last place. Now all I needed to do was win. After the spoon curve, the black Impreza tried to avenge his brother on a dangerously fast section. Thankfully, that barely did anything, diverting my focus to give that upstart any attention would do me more harm than good anyway. So, I put my attention to the Casio triangle, where the CRT could be deployed, so I still had to be careful not to overdo it and plunge the car into the sand. Given my conditions, there will be no recovering from that. On the 2nd lap, I remained uncontested even through after the S-curves. On the Dunlop curve, I even managed to form a gap. This would be useful as a buffer for the high-speed sections. From that point on, I have devised yet another plan to remain ahead of the pack, while trying not to run out of nitrous at the very end. On the 12th corner, I engaged the boost only to keep the rest of the pack behind. The RX-8 edged me out of the road and into the grass. This was instrumental in sending me flying to the walls. There was little to no choice but to rely on creative racing techniques to immediately regain the upper hand. As if the RX-8 was not satisfied in his murder attempt, he struck again right after we entered the 3rd lap. I was lucky I was braking, otherwise that would have ended in a hot, ugly mess. I shook off any feelings of anger. I could not let that cloud me as I needed to focus and win the final round. After the spoon curve, I boosted the car just enough to remain leading throughout the section. On the final lap, right after the spoon curve, I had decided to not engage and let both cars pass, as fighting back on these conditions would most likely turn deadly for me. Instead, I tried my best to keep them as close as I could, and once we hit the Casio triangle, I employed CRT once again and popped right back in the track in front of the RX-8. With the last of my nitrous, I raced towards the finish line to claim my victory, both on this round and the tournament as a whole. After 5 grueling races, I have proven that the AutoZam could win the race featuring Japan's best sports cars. See, without the extra starting cash, I wouldn't have even thought on getting a compact and upgrading it to get and max out that AutoZam, which was the key to so many difficult events we had encountered today, proving that starting with a million credits doesn't always lead to a playthrough that's too easy. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, look at the date. Happy April's Fool's all y'all! So, did you like this video? Are you interested in more unique playthroughs of this timeless game? Or are you curious on what I do in general? If you do, please check out the time I tried to beat Gran Turismo 4 only with cars that has V8 engine, or the time I tried to beat the game with just Honda NSX. Go try them out, you'll like them.